Interestingly, by coincidence, Hitler actually came to power. He was properly elected in 1933 with a 33% vote share, which is actually sort of ironically exactly the vote share that Mr. Modi got in 2014. And Hitler would not have come to power if the left and the center had come together, which they did not. Like if they had come together in India. So they, I think that we all contain within ourselves our worst selves and our best selves.
Of course.
Gandhiji's genius, I think, as a leader was that he brought out our best selves. The leadership, the genius of leaders we have today is that they're bringing out our worst selves. That is really what is happening. We are the same people. My advice in Nepal is try to deepen our capacities for kindness and for solidarity.
Empathy.
For empathy, for standing together. One of the many things I learned when I studied Nazi Germany was that the horror of Nazi Germany is not really just Hitler. We like to imagine that some really evil man came and he led the country. The horror of Nazi Germany is how much he was adored by ordinary people in such large numbers. He could not have accomplished the killing of 6 million Jews without huge support from ordinary people. And we must remember that actually the German people did not defeat fascism. They lost the war. But he continued to have massive support of ordinary Germans. Historians tell me that the proportion of non-Jewish Germans who saved Jews was, just guess, 0.01%.
Oh my gosh.
So, it was an entire society, and it just took 12 years from his election to his suicide and defeat. Was just 12 years, and how a country that was considered the most civilized, it had, the largest number of Nobel winners, thinkers, composers, how it can get so brutalized. So I realized from that mirror that the horror of what is unfolding in my own very beloved country is not the leader, it's ordinary people. We are seeing a growing radicalization. What they are trying to do is to imitate the Abrahamic religions and, European fascism, Zia's Pakistan, whatever, where you have to have, so you're recreating a very different Ram into one God, and that also an angry militant God, very different from the compassionate Ram that we so respect. Gandhiji was so deeply devout as a Hindu, and from there he said, I must respect every other religion, and he gave his life. Likewise with Maulana Azad. Savarkar, on the other hand, was a self-professed atheist. And Jinnah was not a practicing Muslim most of his life.
Either.
So those who wanted a religious state were not religious. The people who wanted a secular state were deeply religious. In Germany, you're seeing a massive rise of the far right. They got, I think, 14% of the vote share. The Communist Party got 4.5% of the vote share.
In the land of Karl Marx.
In the land of Karl Marx. I call it a civilizational crisis that the human family across the world is going. Why are more and more countries moving further and further to the right? My guess is that it has a lot to do with the economic model that we chose, which is creating massive inequality, unprecedented probably in human history. Mr. Adani, India's richest man, his wealth increased 10 times during the lockdown. Young people are growing up today around much of the world with no future to look forward to. And technological developments, AI, etc., are probably going to make it worse and worse. We've reached a place when we are defensive about saying, I believe in a country that should have love and respect for all.
Yeah.
I'm defensive about saying that.
Yeah.
I'm frightened to say that I believe in the constitutional values and the freedom struggle and the path that Gandhi showed us.
Sure.
In a sense, we are continuing the second part of our freedom struggle today.
Yeah.
There will be costs. We have to be willing to pay those costs. It is like living in Nazi Germany and speaking about everything else except the Jews.
Yeah.
Remember that when Gandhi led us to this idea of a country of equal respect for all religions, was just in the shadows of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And the Second World War. So it was even more remarkable, and we had just emerged from the Great Bengal famine. There was hunger, there was poverty, million people had slaughtered each other. At that time, we held on to the moral path. It is not, I'm convinced it's not because we're seeing, as I said, a civilizational crisis. Let the Nepalese people show all of us in South Asia and then to the rest of the world that you are trying to draw what is best from our civilizational tradition and not what is worst. You absolutely are insightful that there is, with all its power and bravado and so on, there is a deep insecurity in the right. Courage is not of a mob that gathers and lynches an unarmed man to death for eating a banana from a Ganesh Pandal. Courage is in the person who goes in and stops them and tries to save life. I feel that, and that's why I call the ideology of Gandhi for me and what he's taught me is not just love, but radical love. Love based on immense courage. Think of a time again back in 1947, 1 million people have slaughtered each other, in religious hatred. And you say, no, India will still be a country that includes its Muslim citizens as equals. He appealed to them. His last appeals was please stay back, this is your country. That is love that requires enormous courage. The ideology that they stand for is based on a perpetual sense of grievance, of indignation, of India, the Hindu majority is 80%. In Pakistan, it's even more remarkable.
Yeah.
Muslims are 97%.
Still they are insecure.
Still they're insecure. Yet, when the Ukraine war happened, one of my colleagues, she said, the time has come to go back to European values.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, which values are you speaking about? Are you speaking about colonialism?
Yeah.
Are you speaking about the
Slavery.
Holocaust?
Yeah.
Are you talking about slavery? Are you talking about destroying indigenous populations? Are you talking about the worst war that the world has seen?
Yeah.
Which European values are you speaking about? But it also reveals that in their deepest consciousness, they probably know we are right and they are wrong, and that history will finally be on our side.
Hello, namaste everyone. As you know, in the Bodh Varta series, we have been talking seriously about the issue related to the politics of faith in South Asia. So after doing 6 deep dive videos, we are here now with one special conversation with Harsh Mander. He's here. He has come to Nepal from India for the World Social Forum. Meanwhile, we are sitting now to discuss about the same issue. And as you have seen in the previous videos, I have been attempting to shed light on the aspects of this issue which are not usually covered in the media because of various reasons. And I'm especially excited to have this in-depth conversation because it's always good to hear from the horse's mouth, as they say. Harsh Mander, he's a writer, peace activist, and I'll read his bio here briefly, and then we'll proceed with the conversation. Okay, he's a human rights and peace worker, writer, columnist, researcher, and teacher. He is the chairperson of the Center for Equity Studies, which is devoted to the analysis and development of public policy and law for justice and rights of the disadvantaged groups. To counter the rising hate violence and lynching, he heads the national initiative called the Karwan-e-Mohabbat, or Caravan of Love, for atonement, solidarity, healing, conscience, and justice. He is the visiting faculty in Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, Bridge University, Amsterdam, Heidelberg University, and FAU Erlangen, Nuremberg. So, lately, I have been following many of his articles, especially in the Indian media outlet scroll.in, and we'll start this conversation with reference to one of his articles in the in Scroll. So, the article is titled, "Was it raw hatred or indifference? Why the lynching of a young Muslim man still haunts me?" So that was the kind of ground report that we can hardly see even in India, a place which is called the largest democracy in the world, and which has so many media outlets. But the kind of reportage that he has done in this piece, it's very difficult to, that's very unusual to come by. So I'll read two paragraphs from this one, and this will give the flavor of how Harsh writes and how he expresses himself. So he gives the description of one event. I'm reading this also because we'll be coming to this theme again and again when we talk about the society and state in India. So he gives the description. It was still dark when he seemed to have wandered to a Ganesh Pandal. So by he here it means Muhammad Ishaq, who was killed in Delhi recently. A Ganesh Pandal 3 lanes away, barely 200 meters from his home. Hungry, he picked up a banana from the prasad laid out before the idol. As he was walking away, some local young men spotted him. They were of the same neighborhood and perhaps knew him. Someone recognized him to be a Muslim. They raised an alarm and caught the young man for interrogation. Tongue-tied at the best of times, he was terrified, barely able to answer. A neighbor later told the reporter that he awakened to a scream that pierced the darkness. In the gathering light of the morning, he found that Ishaq had been strapped with a leather belt and long saffron bands of cloth to an electric pole. A video that circulated later revealed he had been tightly strapped in a cruelly painful posture, his legs pulled up in front of him. Young men then took turns in beating him with sticks, bricks, and stones. He pleaded, "If I am a thief, hand me over to the police." So that was one of the recent pieces in Scroll. And I think it's good to dive straight into the current status of India. Again, there will be so many things, but I'll like to start from one point. That is, in the Indian subcontinent, many communities have coexisted for such a long time. And there used to be some strife even before 2014 when Narendra Modi became Prime Minister. And the scenes like the ones I just described from your writing, that has been troublingly normal for different parts of India. So at the societal level, what changed so fundamentally in 2014? Or was it a process already underway and accelerated under Narendra Modi? Or has something changed fundamentally? So what has changed over the past decade in India, whose result has been a scenario like this? So we'll start with this, sir.
See, it's not happened suddenly.
Okay.
we have to go back to India's freedom struggle.
Okay.
In India's freedom struggle was not just a battle against British colonialism. It was from the start a battle also about what kind of India we would build after the British left. And in the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, there was an imagination for our country that we would build a country where it would not matter whether you worship this God or that Allah, or you would worship nobody, what your language, caste, gender, uh, ethnicity, you will be a fully equal citizen of this country. That was, at the heart of our imagination. And it is this that was also written into our constitution. But the Hindu right, particularly the Hindu Mahasabha and the RSS, never accepted this imagination. RSS was constituted actually 99 years ago, in 1925, and they have fought for a very different kind of battle. India, as we know, got freedom. The Muslim League also felt that the Muslim minority cannot get equality unless we build a country of Muslims in a majority. And as we know, Pakistan was carved out with the eastern and western flanks. There was huge bloodshed at that time. 1 million people, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, killed each other in an unending kind of slaughter. And, if we go back to that moment to understand where we are today, there was so much, rivers of blood were flowing, in entire train loads of full of corpses were going from both sides. My own family is actually from Rawalpindi, which is now in Pakistan. They also were uprooted amidst a lot of violence. So this is the background. Now, at that time, Pakistan was constituted on the basis of religion. And it was, it was easy at that time to imagine that India then would be like a mirror of Pakistan. That's a Muslim nation. This is a Hindu nation. But I think I'm truly grateful that under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi and others, India chose a very different path. And Gandhiji lived for many ideas, but he died for the idea of equal citizenship for Muslims in this country. And his last fast in Calcutta and 2 weeks before he died was precisely to bring peace and bring back our humanity. And then Gandhiji was assassinated by people belonging to this, Hindutva right-wing ideology. And when he got assassinated, I think the country was in a sense stunned into understanding where we were going. The slaughter stopped. And in the first, and fortunately we were led by people like Jawaharlal Nehru. The constitution was written by a really fine leader, Baba Sahib Ambedkar. And it seemed that we had resolved this question, that India would be very different from Pakistan. In fact, our idea of nationalism was also interestingly quite different from, say, the European idea, the French or the German idea, etc. That there would be, in our understanding of the country we would build, we would, you would be free to follow your own religion, your way of life, your language, your culture, and still belong equally
to this country.
To this country. That was our imagination. I was fortunate to have been born maybe 7 years after freedom, and in my childhood, I recall a childhood of idealism. I don't hear, although I'm a partition family, I never heard bigotry against Muslims. It was a very different India that we were seeming to build. But the RSS and the Hindu right never accepted this imagination for India. They didn't accept the constitution. For 50 years, they did not even fly the national flag on their headquarters because it shows actually symbolically saffron, white, and green in equal measure, symbolizing equal belonging of different communities. Um, they uh, they went into the shadows but gradually returned.
Yeah.
And in the great movement against uh, the Congress led by Indira Gandhi, Jayaprakash Narayan actually brought in the RSS,
Yeah.
and they were waiting for that moment of legitimization.
Okay.
And since then, they've never looked back,
Yeah.
and they've grown in political strength. Um, I would like to also underline that where we've reached today is not only the responsibility of the RSS and the BJP. Secular parties have continued to compromise with this secular idea, the idea of equal respect, equal belonging, equal rights for people of every faith. The Hindu right work, but secular parties also continue to compromise in different ways. During the communal riots, there was partisanship. There were many wrong decisions. And at some point in the 80s, the Hindu right picked up the symbol of a particular mosque in Ayodhya, which they claimed was built after demolishing a temple, and a claim that actually Lord Ram was born under the central dome, and therefore the mosque needs to be broken down. It is that movement that changed India before our eyes, and in 1992, many of us regard it perhaps as the most tragic day in India's history, modern India's history, after Gandhiji's assassination, when a mob climbed onto the mosque and broke it down. So since then, there has been a continuous decline in the adherence of India's populace to that idea of equal respect for every religion and equal belonging. Having said that, 2014 was a very significant turning point, because for the first time, people in the highest constitutional offices of the country, including, of course, the Prime Minister, but also the President and so on, were people who'd spent their entire adult lives as active members of the RSS. Now, the RSS and its belief for India is in profound contradiction of the constitutional idea of India. In these 10 years, we see that I see the state in India has, in a sense, declared war against segments of its own people. And I see three kinds of wars. The first war, as I see it, is against India's Muslims, to some extent against India's Christians, but primarily against India's Muslims. And there's open hatred, so it manifested itself in the political marginalization of Muslims. So, for the BJP openly said, we don't want Muslim votes. And please remember, there are 200 million Muslims in India. I mean, many countries in Europe together don't constitute 200 million. Now you suddenly, in a sense, have expelled them from political participation. We reached a point when proudly there wasn't a single member of parliament, Muslim member of parliament in the ruling party, in the higher house, in the lower house of parliament, in any of the legislatures. Today, we have one member of a legislature who's Muslim across the entire country. So there's a political marginalization, electoral marginalization, and again, the secular parties have responded not by proudly standing with their Muslim brothers and sisters, but they are also much more hesitant in raising the Muslim question, even when they're being attacked. Then there was a social project against Muslims, and the social project is of runaway hate speech. You have people, saying, calling for genocide openly. Religious leaders in places like Haridwar, and no action is taken, calling for mass rape.
And even in popular songs, folk songs,
and pop songs, and those Hindutva songs, etc. But side by side is the rise of lynching. We've not seen lynching where crowds gather in the name of protecting a cow or so-called love jihad. So lynching became another response. But after, so there was a certain normalization of hate. But even more than normalization, there was what I would call valorization of hate. Meaning that you actually can prove that you love your religion only by hating other religions. Whereas Gandhiji had taught us that if you truly love your religion, you will respect every other. It's a very different understanding. So this valorization of hate. 2019, when Mr. Modi went back to the polls, in 2014, he still talked about jobs, economy, he talked about many things. By 2019, it was clear that nothing of that was happening. So what was on offer now was clear, straightforward Hindutva. And his vote share went
up,
went significantly higher. And so since 2019, I see that now the state is performing, its direct role against Muslims. So you have bulldozers demolishing their homes, you have the police smashing, like in Haldwani recently, and it happens over and over again. You're seeing the government changing history books, changing textbooks, changing any name of a city or a road which reflects our Muslim history and identity is being erased. So that's the kind of war against, and Article 370, which gave special protection to the only Hindu majority, Muslim majority state, Jammu and Kashmir.
That was revoked.
That was revoked, and the citizenship laws were changed. So all of that, and then they moved towards the Ram temple, and so that's one. But I think there are two other wars that that the state is also waging. It's also waging a war against people who stand in defense of the Muslims who are being attacked, the Christians who are being attacked, and who are standing in defense of the Constitution. So people like us are now, the state is charging us with all kinds of crimes. So that's a second kind of war. A third war, which I think we don't observe so closely, I see a war also against informal labor. Because demonetization, the kind of lockdown we had, has also reduced our working poor more and more. So you're seeing a very different India in these 10 years. And India is, we've reached a point where my Muslim brothers and sisters in our country are living increasingly with a sense of fear and betrayal. Just to give you one recent illustration, a railway constable in uniform, he is in a train, he has an argument with his boss who tries to restrain him, he shoots him dead. Then he walks through the train and he picks 3 Muslim men of clearly Muslim identity and shoots them. Nobody intervenes. And then he gives a big speech on camera where he says he's doing this for Modi and Yogi. And
and he is defended by many people.
And he's defended by many people. The Prime Minister doesn't make a single statement. The next morning, actually, one of my young Muslim colleagues, she came into my office and she was sobbing away. And she said, I cannot sleep, I cannot think after this, because that man could have been my father, he could have been my brother. And I thought as she spoke that maybe 1 million households this conversation would be having. You needed the leader of the country to reach out, to express grief, to reassure. So in fact, I wrote a piece, the speech that Mr. Modi did not make after this. And I said, precisely in a speech that this country belongs equally to all our people, and I have deep sadness, but he never felt the need to do that.
Okay, we'll come to the present time. That's from 2019 to 24 and the upcoming election later in the conversation. Right now, you made some interesting remarks about the time when the RSS was founded, 1920s. Yeah. So recently, when I was searching for my video series, before that research, I had listened to one podcast series made by BBC. That is the Nazis, the Rise to Power. That also details the period between 1919 and 33, when Hitler came to power. So that, and recently another BBC documentary about Narendra Modi, there also they briefly mentioned that. So while researching for this, for my video series, I looked for and found different books by V.D. Savarkar and M.S. Golwalkar. So in the book Hindutva by V.D. Savarkar, that was published in 1923. That's a very interesting date because it was the same year when Hitler in Germany tried to capture the state power with the coup d'etat.
Absolutely.
And when I went on reading his book Hindutva, and there is one more book which is less known, but that details his worldview even more clearly. I think that's titled 6 Glorious Epochs of Indian Society or Civilization, something like that. So in that, he details India's history from a particular lens and paints a very, very bleak picture of the Indian rulers because they were not brutal enough in the struggles that ensued when people attacked Indian states. That is there. But the most striking thing is that I think Akash Banerjee made a video recently comparing elaborating the many signs of Nazism and how they are being replicated elsewhere. Of course, he didn't name India, but he has made a very, very meticulous and detailed video. So I found it very striking similarity between the rhetoric used by Savarkar, used by Golwalkar. To be precise, somewhere Savarkar has written that India should deal with its Muslim problem the way Germany dealt with its Jewish problem. That's his statement. And after reading that, I came to realize how lucky India was to have leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru and Vallabhbhai Patel and Maulana Azad, those people who played the leading role in the Indian independence movement. So now it looks like in the past century, India has gone full circle from Gandhi's position again back to Savarkar's and Golwalkar's position. And one more thing that troubles me is that we are here in Nepal, we are between India and China, and the different social experiments that the states are doing with the people, they are very scary. So in China, the experiment that China is doing in the Xinjiang with the Uyghur people. Yeah. So now the whole of China risks that experiment being duplicated elsewhere with the social credit system and everything, in which state has all the power. So even though India is still some way to go before becoming that totalitarian, still the signs are not good for India. That's what I see. And I became even more troubled after the start of this strife in Manipur. Yeah. And the state's inaction, insensitivity, and even deliberate provocation to the violence by sticking up with that tainted chief minister in Manipur. And the most problematic aspect of all that was the total insensitivity of the ruling establishment to the suffering of people from every community in Manipur. So I think that should have been one awakening occasion for the Indian population, but sadly, even the Indian population at large, what we call mainland India, that seems to be losing its sensitivity towards that kind of thing. So my next question is, the way BJP, Narendra Modi, RSS are the people related to the politics of faith and otherwise, they are in one place. But especially when it comes to mob lynching, it doesn't always happen with the immediate backing of a political party. And it often happens spontaneously, even though the context is set by the politics. So how do you explain the declining sensitivity of the society related to these issues, and how profound is that? And do you think there is regional variation inside India about the radicalization of the people and their brutalization and their acceptance of this violence towards minority and towards the dissenters? So what's the dynamics in India at the level of the society?
So Jeevan, you've said a lot of things, all of them very thoughtful. And so let me respond a little bit to many things that you said. Firstly, the comparisons with Nazi Germany and the rise of Hitler and his valorization by the RSS and the Hindu Mahasabha.
Yeah.
I spent, unusually for myself, I was invited for a fellowship, and I spent almost a year recently in Germany. And I chose in this fellowship to study what happened in Nazi Germany, to understand better what is happening in my own country. And it was a terrifying study. Because the similarities are step by step similar to what is unfolding in India. It is so similar that it cannot be a coincidence, because there's the changes in citizenship laws, the changes in criminalizing interreligious marriages.
Attack on the dissenters.
Attacks on dissenters, attacks on liberal universities, changing of names, changing history. Even films like, Kashmir Files, which are very bigoted. Again, there's the same story there, which are promoted directly by Hitler, and so on and so forth. Interestingly, by coincidence, Hitler actually came to power. He was properly elected in 1933 with a 33% vote share, which is actually sort of ironically exactly the vote share that Mr. Modi got in 2014. And Hitler would not have come to power if the left and the center had come together, which they did not, like if they had come together in India. So there are too many similarities. So that's one. The second is that the open admiration of the RSS, they've actually gone further, and actually Mr. Golwalkar, the founder, one of the founding thinkers of the RSS, whom Mr. Modi has said is the person who's inspired him most in his life. He describes Hitler as a great nationalist leader, etc. And doesn't even mention the Holocaust.
He has written down in the book itself.
He's written in the book itself. Now, I mean, just as an aside, the enormous cynicism of the close relationship of Israel with Mr. Modi, where they're deliberately closing their eyes to a whole ideology which celebrated Hitler's ideology. It just is a commentary again on on the kind of right-wing fundamentalism that is going around the world. Now, coming back to what what else you said, one of the many things I learned when I studied Nazi Germany was that the horror of Nazi Germany is not really just Hitler. We like to imagine that some really evil man came and he led the country. The horror of Nazi Germany is how much he was adored by ordinary people in such large numbers. He could not have accomplished the killing of 6 million Jews without huge support from ordinary people. And we must remember that actually the German people did not defeat fascism. They lost the war.
Yeah.
But he continued to have massive support of ordinary Germans. Historians tell me that the proportion of non-Jewish Germans who saved Jews was, just guess, 0.01%.
Oh my God.
So, it was an entire society, and it just took 12 years from his election to his suicide and defeat. It was just 12 years, and how a country that was considered the most civilized, it had, the largest number of Nobel winners, thinkers, composers, how it can get so brutalized. So I realized from that mirror that the horror of what is unfolding in my own very beloved country is not the leader, it's ordinary people. We're seeing a growing radicalization where more and more people are getting compelled by this ideology of hate. And it's remarkable because at a time when the economy is failing from a high point that the last Prime Minister had left it, jobs are barely being created. Prices are shooting through the sky, even of vegetables, etc. The handling of the lockdown was devastating of COVID. I've just written a book about it, which I've called "Burning Pyres, Mass Graves, and a State That Failed Its People." So, with all of that, when the popularity of Modi is going higher and higher, it only means that he succeeded in persuading more and more Hindus that their central enemy and problem is India's Muslims. And whatever else he may accomplish or not accomplish, he has declared war on them and therefore stand behind them. So it is this when he consecrated the temple in Ayodhya on 22nd January. Firstly, of course, in a secular country, the Prime Minister should not have participated in his official avatar in a religious ceremony, and he was like the principal actor in that. That would have been troubling enough, but much more significantly, it wasn't an ordinary temple. It was a temple built on the site of a mosque that was brought down by mobs in defiance of the orders of the Supreme Court, in defiance of all constitutional norms. So it was a different kind of consecration, and a couple of days later, the Union Cabinet actually passes a resolution praising it. And what they said was that in 1947, only the body of India had been freed. Its soul was freed on 22nd January 2024. Now, the soul of my country was freed at the time that Gandhi led us to, in spite of partition, to a country which would be kind and equal and including all. That was when when The Soul of My Country was released, it was released when he died for that idea of love. It was not released now. And I mean, that the soul is actually, getting crushed with this new ideology of hate. So, yeah, and the last thing that you also mentioned was about diversity across the country.
Yeah.
I am convinced that significant sections of practicing Hindus in India are not in support of Hindutva.
Yeah.
And I think we have to keep making this decision. The Jewish religion is not Zionism.
Yeah.
Islam is a country that is a religion that teaches both equality and peace. It is not Islamism. The Christian faith, which teaches compassion, is not Christian evangelism. The Buddhist faith, the Buddhist faith of Buddha is very far from what the Sinhalese radical militant priests
or the Burmese military,
military priests are saying.
Yeah.
So likewise, Hindutva is very different from Hinduism. In fact, in many ways, I think it is a complete contradiction of Hindu beliefs. Because the Hindu religion in your country and mine has huge problems. It has huge problems because of its long tradition of caste and inequality. It's the only major religious tradition that actually valorizes inequality in the way that our religion does. But on the other hand, what is very interesting about Hinduism is that you have so much space. You can believe in one God. Yeah. You can believe in this one. You can believe in that one.
Or not believe in any God.
Or not believe in any God. Yeah. You can worship in one way, not worship in one way. You can do almost anything and still be a Hindu. So what they are trying to do is to imitate the Abrahamic religions and European fascism, Zia's Pakistan, whatever, where you have to have so you're recreating a very different Ram into one God, and that also an angry militant God, very different from the compassionate Ram that we so respect, and one book and one belief system, etc., which is imposed or not. So I think Hindutva is very different from the Hindu religion. And most dramatically, of course, and I often think about this, that in our freedom struggle in India, if you have to identify two people who were willing to give their life for the rights of people of other religions, I would choose Mahatma Gandhi and Maulana Azad, and both of them were deeply religious.
Yeah.
So Gandhiji was so deeply devout as a Hindu, and from there he said, I must respect every other religion, and he gave his life. Likewise with Maulana Azad. Savarkar, on the other hand, was a self-professed atheist.
Yeah.
And Jinnah was not a practicing Muslim most of his life.
Either.
So those who wanted a religious state were not religious. The people who wanted a secular state were deeply religious. So it's got nothing to do with religion.
Okay. So from here, I'd like to broaden the conversation for a wider context, even outside India and the evolving media landscape also. Right. I think the two questions are interrelated. Firstly, when Clubhouse, one audio platform, became global, so there was one big room in which many people from the right-wing side of Indian politics and society that come there. And in that, Vivek Agnihotri, the maker of the Kashmir File, he was there. And what he said there struck me. So what he said was, until now and before social media, there is a filter that used to give preference to the leftist so-called leftist or liberal voices. But since social media came, the now the level playing field has been created. Now we are free to say anything we like, and now we are totally free to propagate our ideas. He said that in some context, but I think that holds true for almost all the groups in the world, especially in the right. So I think the social media experiment of the past 10-12 years that has hugely amplified the voices of the right-wing people across the world. Along with that, the religious bigotry, racism, xenophobia, white supremacy in the United States and even in Europe. And the tragedy now is
and Zionism.
Yeah, Zionism, of course.
Zionism, Islamophobia.
Yeah, all of them. And one particularly troubling anecdote, you were also earlier talking about Germany. So I saw some headline from someone who was ruminating that is Germany again about to go back to the times of Hitler? And with the rise of the far-right parties in the Germany, was that interlude of tolerance, pluralism, and peace, was that a brief interlude? So now we are at such a point in which thinking about along those lines has been usual. So that's one thing. And the evolution of social media. In India in particular, I think India has been the incubator of the extreme practices by political parties in using social media to spread hate and to neutralize the criticism. That experiment is ongoing. Right now, globally, especially the ideas of liberalism, ideas of toleration, peace, harmony, it looks like they have been under siege. That's the
absolutely.
That's the feeling with the people with those beliefs. And one thing I see, the people in the right, they are so much in unity and solidarity, and they are very, very passionate about this. And the voice in the liberal side and in the left of the political spectrum, that's quite fragmented, amorphous, and they are not able to tackle the voice or noise from the other side with the matching amplitude, let's say. That's there. So looking to the future, until now we have talked about what happened until now. So it's a very critical moment, especially for India right now. In Nepal, that critical moment will come after 3 years, because we'll have the next general elections in Nepal. And it's very difficult to remain unaffected by a country size of India when we are in the vicinity. And we are right now, my feeling is that if Nepal can learn from India by India's mistakes, then we can save us from many troubles. That's my feeling. So talking about India's future, especially after 2024, it's very, very hard to think how things could get better at this point of time. And even if we see the past decade, what Narendra Modi did in 2014 was much more benign compared to what he did after 2019. Yeah. And it looks like after this inauguration of the Ram temple, if he gets huge mandate again in 2024, it looks to me that things will get much worse. And that's a trouble for India and also for Nepal. So now, assuming that the people who are speaking against the power have some agency and have duty and responsibility to speak. So how do you see the anti-establishment voices in India doing over the coming months and years to neutralize what the ruling establishment does? And what's your general impression about how you already touched upon how ineffectual the stances of the secularist parties in India has been? I think only one bright spot left now is at the level of civil society and media, there are some bright spots even in India. So how best can we speak up? Can we resist? Or do you have any particular lessons for a country like Nepal, where things are not as bad as in India or Pakistan, at least right now? And I think this question is even more important, because in countries other than India and Pakistan, like Bangladesh, things are not heading in particularly good direction, when especially when it comes to democracy, and these things are related again. And the even in Bangladesh, I think there is a huge risk of this religious fundamentalism gaining ground when the state goes on repressing the voice in the middle. I see that risk also. So about the future of India relating to civil society, and any suggestions for Nepal?
As in everything that you've been saying in this conversation, you made a lot of thoughtful remarks. Briefly, let me respond to some of what you said earlier and then come to your main question. In Germany, you're seeing a massive rise of the far right.
Yeah.
They got, I think, 14% of the vote share. The Communist Party got 4.5% of the vote share.
In the land of Karl Marx.
In the land of Karl Marx.
Yeah.
And I was recently in Germany, and our friends took us to parts of East Germany, former East Germany, where there's 30-40% vote share of the far right.
Yeah.
We're seeing Italy, we see Sweden, which was unthinkable, moving to the right. We're seeing country after country where if they're not coming to power, like in France, they become the most important opposition party.
And they're even influencing the other parties.
Other parties. And the other parties are responding with defensiveness, which is what I'll also speak a little bit about. I think I call it a civilizational crisis that the human family across the world is going. Why are more and more countries moving further and further to the right? My guess is that it has a lot to do with the economic model that we chose, which is creating massive inequality, unprecedented probably in human history. Mr. Adani, India's richest man, his wealth increased 10 times during the lockdown.
During the lockdown only?
During the lockdown, 10 times. And his wealth at the end of the lockdown, let me ask you to guess, if 100 workers worked at statutory wages, how long would they take to get the wealth that Mr. Adani had at the end of the lockdown?
Maybe millions of years.
1 million years.
1 million years, yeah.
So we're seeing levels of inequality that are unthinkable. And on the other side, there are no jobs.
Yeah.
Young people are growing up today around much of the world with no future to look forward to. And, technological developments, AI, etc., are probably going to make it worse and worse. So my guess is that at a time when more and more young people around the world are not looking forward to a future of hope, they would either confront the economic model, or they find people to blame and hate, and they're being led more and more in that direction. That's a somewhat somewhat simplistic answer, but I think there would be a fair amount of truth in that direction. Coming to India, a democracy is only as strong as is the opposition.
Yeah.
And democracy is failing because opposition is collapsing. Another word about the secular parties. Recently, 9 members of parliament of different parties of the opposition wanted to meet a few of us from civil society. Behind closed doors, it was an extraordinarily heartening meeting for me, because they spoke exactly like we are speaking.
Yeah.
They understand everything, they feel, and yet they don't say. My comment to them was that I felt really happy listening to you, but why don't you say this from public platforms? We've reached a place when we are defensive about saying, I believe in a country that should have love and respect for all.
Yeah.
I'm defensive about saying that.
Yeah.
I'm frightened to say that I believe in the constitutional values and the freedom struggle and the path that Gandhi showed us. So that's a problem. But the media has almost completely collapsed, except some very fine heroic exceptions. The university, the liberal arts university, has almost completely broken down. The last frontier of dissent is what we call civil society. And there also there are huge problems. I mean, I find more and more people are censoring themselves.
Yeah.
They're willing to talk about, let's talk about price rise, let's talk about something else. Surely there would be other problems. But they won't speak on the Muslim question, even in civil society. That's why somebody like, people who are frontally trying to confront this problem have become smaller and smaller in numbers. I tell my comrades,
and are being persecuted.
And of course we're being very persecuted, but it's just going back to what I said in the beginning about the freedom struggle. India's freedom struggle was against the British, but also about what kind of country we'd built.
Sure.
In a sense, we are continuing the second part of our freedom struggle today.
Yeah.
There will be costs. We have to be willing to pay those costs. And the government has become very repressive. I have almost every federal agency of India, in the Indian government is today charging me with crimes that I can spend all of this life and the next in prison. So that's there. But you still, and my crime is I speak about radical love, about standing together. But I tell my comrades in civil society that history will judge us harshly. It is like living in Nazi Germany and speaking about everything else except the Jews.
Yeah.
We're doing that. We're doing precisely that. The last question that you asked is a very important one. What do we learn in Nepal, which is actually probably the country least forward in the journey towards extreme right populism, fascism, whatever you'd like to call it. Nepal, I come here and I find its journey quite remarkable. I mean, I think the Nepalese people need to, I know there's chaos in your political system, the political parties, but you're doing something better than the rest of your South Asian neighbors. Just to give one example, a different example is the Global Hunger Index. India is falling lower and lower and lower each time. We are 110 or something in this time, even lower than Pakistan, but way lower than Bangladesh, and most lower than Nepal. Nepal is in some, if I recall correctly, in the 60s. So that means that although you're a much poorer country, you're doing more, even now with all its chaos, more for the poor and working class people. So I think that's something to hold on to be proud of, and to deepen. Because those wars that I spoke about, the wars against the Muslim minority, the war against dissenters and people who uphold the constitution, and the war against, the much quieter war against the informal working poor, go hand in hand together. And I think that one advice would be strengthen and public policy and public actions for the poor and for greater equalities. I mean, that's one part.
Okay.
But the other part is, when I think, and it troubles me a lot why India has reached this place. I mean, going back again one last time, maybe to the 1940s. At a time, remember that when Gandhi led us to this idea of a country of equal respect for all religions, was just in the shadows of the Holocaust and the Second World War. So it was even more remarkable, and we had just emerged from the Great Bengal famine. There was hunger, there was poverty. Million people had slaughtered each other. At that time, we held on to the moral path and showed a pathway, in fact, to the world. What has happened to us now? Many people ask. I think that we all contain within ourselves our worst selves and our best selves.
Yeah, of course.
Gandhiji's genius, I think, as a leader, was that he brought out our best selves. The leadership, the genius of leaders we have today is that they're bringing out our worst selves. That is really what is happening. We are the same people. My advice in Nepal is try to deepen our capacities for kindness and for solidarity.
Empathy.
For standing together. Muslim friends from across the country in particular sit with me in closed rooms and say, where do we go from here? And when I tell them that I don't see, even if the elections in 2024, miraculously see the defeat of the BJP, it's not going to be the defeat of the RSS. That's a much longer battle. The RSS has actually worked with great commitment these last 99 years to reach where they are. We together who believe in the secular idea, the idea of, to put it more simply, the idea of equal respect for all faiths, which is, in our part of the world, is what we could offer to the rest of the world as an example. We have not had the same commitment, and you say we fight between ourselves on small issues. I won't sit with this one, I won't sit with this one, I will. Whereas the right wing is coming together, and that's why they progress unimaginably. So my advice would be try to deepen Nepal as a humane and kind society. Ideally have and it might sound like some sort of airy-fairy idea. It is not. It is not, I'm convinced it's not, because we're seeing, as I said, a civilizational crisis. Let the Nepalese people show all of us in South Asia and then to the rest of the world that you are trying to draw what is best from our civilizational tradition and not what is worst.
So, one thing I find, let's say, fascinating or otherwise, especially in India, in relation to the issue of dissent, is the noose tightens around the neck of the dissenters. So, I have I talked to you about one anecdote before this interview of how they silenced Amir Khan when he spoke. Even that was not even derogatory. It was simply a simple criticism of where the country was heading. And in the flip side, what I feel is Indian state being Indian ruling establishment being itself right now one of the strongest ever since independence, even when you go by the electoral mandate, they are quite secure, quite confident. Indian ruling establishment, ruling parties, and even the prime minister. But when it comes to dissent, I have watched one clip of Stan Swami, who sadly passed away. Before his death, he was suffering from Parkinsonism. He had very bad tremors. He could not hold the glass. That's why he could not drink water from a glass. That's why he asked the jail administration for a straw.
For a sipper, yes.
And it took months and months for the jailer to decide that he can provide a straw so that the poor old man could drink water. And the whole of the Indian state was, if you see in one way, still scared of Stan Swami, who is locked up in a jail, and that went on until his death. Still, the state was brutal, but at the same time insecure. I think that thing. Another anecdote that parallels this one is from China, where one dissenter died inside the jail. He had advanced cancer, and during his last moments, when his family tried to take him out of China for treatment, even then they didn't allow, and he died inside the jail. So I think that's being replicated everywhere, and it looks like the states are competing for more repression and more brutality, more inhumanity. And the problem is the ordinary people are comfortably closing their eyes to all this. And one more troubling anecdote, again, that fits here with this conversation. Once I watched an interview of Mallika Sarabhai. Do you know her?
Very well.
Okay. I think it was for News Laundry. In that interview, she was describing about this Gujarat riots of 2002. So she describes one scene in which, so there are riots. People mostly from poor background, and most of them Dalits and disadvantaged group, they were mobilized for violence.
Yeah.
And then once the shops of the Muslims were ransacked, then somebody from the middle class will take his car, go there, loot all that, that's good, and also call from there to his friend, see, here I have got these things, please come and let's collect them.
Her friends,
So-
which is even worse.
Yeah,
Women.
yeah,
Also.
that was the role the middle class played during those riots. So now I'm even finding it difficult to formulate the question, but the idea is, how do we deal with this brutalization of the state, the increasing brutality of the state, brutalization and insensitivity of the people at a time when social media algorithms are prioritizing the most bigoted, most violent, most sensational content, and they are delivering it to the people in every corner of the country now with the spread of the smartphone. And I think things are only set to get worse with the advent of AI. Now the customized materials, it's the cost of making posts and content customized for people, that's going to be way easier. And so how do we, you may not have the answer, but the problem, the line of thinking that I am having right now, and the thing I am contemplating now is that, how do we navigate in face of all these adversities when even the companies like Facebook and Twitter and OpenAI, and they are now prioritizing their profit over the societal welfare. And I think especially when it comes to the people in political parties and even in civil society, I think they are yet to grasp the enormity of the problem that's coming our way in the near future.
Yeah.
So, do you have any insights on how better to navigate in this situation, especially in relation to social media? You must have been watching this closely, as you are in India, and India is at the leading edge of using social media to bigoted ends. So, what do you see this? How do you see this coming period of time?
So, Jeevan, you've talked about two very different things, and I'll try to respond to them separately. One is on social media. Um, earlier you talked about Vivek Agnihotri, the filmmaker, saying that
Yeah.
it has created a level play field. I mean, that's absolutely not true, because what drives social media is unimaginable profits and money, and the BJP has its IT cell, which is quite notorious. But I realize that every time I write anything, I mean, they have a whole army of paid trolls, and of course, there must be also dedicated. I mean, people just doing it for ideological, but there are people who are just, it's a whole machinery of multiplying hate, whereas the alternative is not there. So that I still get enough sort of positive, thoughtful responses to what I write is probably an indication that actually they're so much larger in actual strength, but it doesn't get exposed. Social media is a danger, but I would like to just still say, exercise a certain word of caution, partly with a question, because social media, long before social media was there, the RSS still worked with rumor and hate mongering in spectacular ways. We can take hundreds of examples, but one of the very big communal massacres that we saw was in 1989 in Bhagalpur. Now, in Bhagalpur, at least 2,000 people were killed in just one district, and it all arose from a rumor that Hindu students in the Bhagalpur town in hostels had been killed. Actually, not a single child had been actually killed. But how this rumor, long before there was social media, spread from village to village to village, resulting in retributive slaughter of 2,000 Muslims. So it's simplistic to say it's because of social media.
Okay.
Social media has given a very powerful vehicle for something that is much more, which already existed
And entrenched.
and entrenched. And how do you have this dedicated force to spread hate through falsehoods and rumors? Is, I think, a much more complex question. And having said that, social media is also what allowed, the Arab Spring to happen. The social media is also what allows many of our secular protests to happen. So I think let's not blame the instrument or the vehicle for something that I think is societal, and we need to address it there. The bigger question that you raised was about dissent. And once again, something that you remarked was very thoughtful. That with so much power, why does the right-wing establishment in India, and indeed, with Trump and with people like this around the world, why are they so insecure?
Yeah.
Why are they, for instance, I'm a I'm an individual. I'm not even part of a mass organization. I have a collective which we call the Karwane Mohabbat, or Caravan of Love, where we come together whenever there's a lynching and hate violence. We go to the family to say you're not alone, to care, and so on. But it's a small, and why is the entire force of the state trying to come down on people like me uh, is a very uh, interesting question, which reveals, and precisely, I mean, it cannot. If you were so confident, you wouldn't respond the way that you do. Even politically, they make so much. I mean, they try to, and they succeeded in caricaturing the communist leader Rahul Gandhi as a kind of fool or buffoon, which clearly he wasn't. But if he's such a buffoon, why are you so obsessed by him?
Yeah.
And and you continuously, and you try to, for some sort of mild remark, you expel him from parliament. They've just frozen the bank accounts of the Congress, etc. So there's a huge amount of the farmers are protesting, and the kinds of barriers they've raised is like some, and they using drones.
That's quite typical.
To drop tear gas, which is actually BSF used for people crossing the borders, and so on. So you absolutely are insightful that there is, with all its power and bravado and so on, there is a deep insecurity in the right, in the far right. There are criticisms of Gandhi. It's very interesting. Again, the criticism of Gandhi and to a much smaller extent to people like us. They used to say of Gandhi that his talk of morality, his emphasis on morality, and his emphasis on non-violence, and his emphasis on kindness were signs of weakness and of and feminine weakness. That he was like a woman and weak. We are this 56-inch strong men because we are amoral and violent. We have no morality, and that's a sign of. So again, it's a kind of moral inversion to which we have all sort of succumbed. I keep saying, if what I stand for is womanly, then I'm very proud to be like a woman. Firstly, and secondly, for me, courage is not of a mob that gathers and lynches an unarmed man to death for eating a banana from a Ganesh Pandal. Courage is in the person who goes in and stops them and tries to save life. I feel that, and that's why I call the ideology of Gandhi, for me, and what he's taught me, is not just love, but radical love. Love based on immense courage. Think of a time, again, back in 1947, 1 million people have slaughtered each other, in religious hatred. And you say, no, India will still be a country that includes its Muslim citizens as equals. He appealed to them. His last appeals was please stay back, this is your country. That is love that requires enormous courage. So dissent has become really difficult because the state is displaying this extreme kind of insecurity. Clearly, I also seen in my own journey, until I started the Karwane Mohabbat, at least, say in a television debate or in a public debate, etc., they would start off by saying, Harsh ji, hum aapki bahut izzat karte hain, lekin now that's not there at all. I mean, the more I speak about love, the more they want to talk to you as if you're some dangerous
anti-national event.
Anti-national is too very mild. I mean, it's much worse. Dangerous man. I'm not. Now, if I go to any university and I'm invited to speak, they get to know and they stop. They don't allow me to even newspapers where I used to write op-eds. Obviously, they've been told not. I mean, any place that I would have a mainstream space to speak has been closed down. And in revealing the same kind of insecurity. So I think the ideology that they stand for is based on a perpetual sense of grievance, of indignation, of fear. So you're the huge dominant majority, but you're still fearful. I mean, India, the Hindu majority is 80%. In Pakistan, it's even more remarkable. Muslims are 97%.
Still they are insecure.
Still they're insecure. I mean, 97%. And so there's 1% Ahmadiyas, there's 1% Hindus or something, and Christians. That's about the 3% that we have. And all their blasphemy laws and all their assassinations, everything is around this. So I think this constructed insecurity. Trump again is trying to say that that you have great danger from the immigrants who are coming across, the Mexican immigrants. We had a great summit in Europe between Rishi Sunak and Macron. And people were celebrating that after so long have the leaders of France and the UK come together, and two handsome young
men,
sort of smart men coming together, etc. And what was the biggest takeaway? We will together work very hard to stop people coming in small boats
from
as immigrants.
France to UK.
I was in the UK on that day, and I just couldn't believe. And somebody from the BBC raised a criticism, and he was sort of he came down. Again, because I teach in universities abroad, I happened to be there just after the Hamas attack and then the Palestine and Israel's war on Palestine, and I was surprised at how little compassion they were willing to show for the Palestinian people. But also that in university, students are not even allowed to say this. Insecurity. I mean, if you're insecure, if you think you're on the right side, why can't you let students express this? So it was up to me in platforms to actually say that when, after the Holocaust, we said never again. Was it never again for just one set of people or for all people? I said, has humanity, I thought humanity had reached a point where when if a child is killed, we don't check first whether she's Muslim or Jewish before I will grieve. I could say these things, and students were so happy because I was saying things that they wanted to say. So this insecurity of the right wing, I think is a very profound thought that you are saying.
And dangerous,
and it is dangerous because they'll get more and more repressive. But it also reveals that in their deepest consciousness, they probably know we are right and they are wrong, and that history will finally be on our side.
Okay, so nice going interview, but we are still 1 point left. So we'll end with one or two questions. The first one relates to the philosophical aspect, let's say philosophical aspect, and I'll quote two people here. One is P. Sainath. In one interview with Kunal Kamra, he has given a very, very beautiful point, which I have repeated so many times, and I have written about that in Nepal also. So there, he makes one very important point. Globally, wherever you see this talk about inclusion, tolerance, human rights, women's rights, there is a tendency to say that, that is imported concept. And especially in countries like Nepal and India, they say dollar-badi, easily. These are the dollar people who talk about these things. in the whole liberal ideas and concepts, they were the imports. They are not native to us. That's why they are invalid. That's the concept. So Kunal Kamra mentioned this issue. And then P. Sainath responded so beautifully. He said, see, when the Brits came to India, they forcibly tried to establish that anything good came from England, right? Anything they called savage or barbarous, that was from India.
Right.
That's why in book after book, the English historians, they went on writing that we imported everything good from Britain to India. That's why human rights came to India, because of in Britain, women's rights came, because minorities' rights came from Britain.
Right. You've said so many interesting things just now, Jeevan, that we could spend another hour conversing about them. Let me respond briefly. Firstly, I recall, why go back to just post-colonial India. When I was in Germany on this fellowship, I had a wonderful group of fellows, very senior thought leaders from around the world, half a dozen of us, very progressive. And yet, when the Ukraine war happened, one of my colleagues, she said, the time has come to go back to European values. And I said, wow, which values are you speaking about? Are you speaking about colonialism?
Yeah.
Are you speaking about the
Slavery.
Holocaust?
Yeah.
Are you talking about slavery? Are you talking about destroying indigenous populations? Are you talking about the worst war that the world has seen? Which European values are you speaking about? And she, of course, we were very close friends, and she herself realized, and she said, unthinkingly, this idea that somehow Europe and North America are upholders of the great values of humankind, when even their recent histories have been, have shown some of the greatest crimes against. So that's absolutely true. What Sainath said was again absolutely true about how history was rewritten, and the RSS has actually found that very useful. What they did was that they portrayed ancient India as the Hindu period, which was a golden period. They paint medieval India, which was where we had largely Muslim rulers, as the dark period. And the British period, the modern period, was one of bringing back civilization and entitlement and enlightenment. Absolutely false. Why, if India was such a India was among the richest sort of places in the world, which is why they wanted to colonize us, and so on, and it suited the Hindu right, because they also wanted to call the medieval period the dark period, and so on. So he's absolutely right in his assessment as well. So where did the ideas of secularism come from, of democracy come? Have they come simply from Western lands and could not find suitable soil in India? I think it's a racist, colonial, and absolutely false. But before I go ahead, I want to recall something that Gandhiji said. Many things. He said, I do not want to close all the doors and windows of my home. I want to keep all my windows open, so the winds come from every corner of the world and enrich me. But I won't be swept off my feet. Right? So yes, of course, we should take good ideas from where they come. They don't become less legitimate if they came to us from another part of the world. So that's the next point. the question of the UN Declaration, and just as an aside, the UN Declaration of Human Rights, we believe that it was something that Eleanor Roosevelt wrote, etc.
Yeah.
Factually, that's not true.
Yeah.
And very few people know that one of the principal contributors
Was Indian.
was an Indian woman called Hansa Mehta,
Yeah,
who was
yeah,
also part of our Constituent Assembly.
Yeah.
And she contributed a great deal to the UN Declaration of Human
Yeah.
Rights. There was also a Chinese sort of activist scholar who also contributed.
Yeah. P. Sainath repeats the thing.
He says this, yes. So these, the conceit that these are ideas that have come to us from elsewhere. I also recall something quite beautiful that Amartya Sen had said in his book, The Idea of Justice. Towards the end of the book, he says there's something that has been common to all human civilizations, all human societies, everywhere in the world, across history. And what is it? He said all of them are characterized by some form of injustice. However, there's something else that is also common to every human society across history and the world, and that is resistance to injustice. So resistance to injustice is really what we call human rights today.
Yeah.
Is something that humankind has done in every part of the world, and it has done injustice. It has done resistance to injustice, and it's part of the collective human civilizational learning that we are. Finally, I'll come to the Ashish Nandi, who's somebody I have deep respect and regard for, and he's also somebody, a dear friend. What he says about, firstly, let me respond firstly by saying that I think on the left, we have been intolerant of religious faith. And I think that's been a big failing.
Yeah.
Even if you go back to Karl Marx, he did say religion was the opium of the masses.
Yeah.
But the full quote is, religion is the moan of the oppressed creature.
Yeah.
It is the heart of heartless conditions. It is it's the sense of a senseless world. It is the opium of the masses.
Yeah.
Now, if my religious beliefs drive me to be kind, and I gave the examples earlier of Maulana Azad and Mahatma Gandhi, then why should I be opposed to it?
Yeah.
So we in the left have been intolerant of religious faith, and we've left that ground, religious faith to be inauthentically and falsely deployed by the right wing.
Yeah.
Whether it's Islamists or Hindutva folks or Zionists or the Christian evangelists. Like Bolsonaro was propped up by Christian evangelists.
Yeah.
So that's also true. But finally, what we call secularism is actually very different from the Western idea of secularism.
Yeah.
If you look, just to give one quick example, since we don't have a lot of time, the French idea of secularism is to discourage a young woman from coming into a classroom with a hijab.
Yeah.
The Indian idea of secularism is to defend her right to wear the hijab.
Yeah.
So it is true that, and our idea actually comes from our civilizational experience, what is best in our civilizational experience. Maulana Azad actually spoke about the Indian subcontinent as a place where, he said, caravans came from every corner of the world, and instead of proceeding on, they settled here. That's the richness of our civilizational tradition, and we should embrace it. And it is in that rich tradition that we learned that I have my path, but you can also have your path. And so we might call it secularism, but I think it's something that has grown significantly out of our own cultural tradition. Even if it had come to us from the West, it was not illegitimate. But as it happens, secularism, as we understand it, is a deeply uh, Indian civilizational idea. And ironically, and this will sound a little provocative to some of your viewers, I think the least Indian of our political parties is the BJP, because it is trying to construct an idea of, of religion and nationalism, which is actually very alien to our own civilizational understanding of it. So that's really where I'd like to say it. And let me end really by what, if I want to ask myself, who is a quintessential Indian? And I would say it's this woman who comes out of a slum in some city, and she goes down the road and she sees a mosque and she bows her head. And then she goes further, she sees a church and she bows her head. And she sees a Gurdwara and she bows her head. And she sees a temple and she bows her head. That is from where we have derived our idea of secularism. And it's an idea and that we must fight for. And it's an idea for which I'm willing to give my life.
So it would be great to, in this interview, in this note, so as you must have realized, there were not many things to be optimistic about, but to remain alive and to keep fighting for one's values. That in itself is a great thing, and that's worth living for, and I think it's worth dying for also, as many people have discovered throughout the world. And in our series, we'll continue to deal with this issue of politics of faith in South Asia in my video series also, and we'll try to include some more great interviews like this. Again, very, very sincere and heartfelt thanks to Harshji, who we met for the first time in today afternoon only. Then he could give this much of time, and we had a very in-depth conversation. And I'd like to assure that in the future also we'll keep hearing from him. I'll be referring to him, and we'll be hearing his video material also. We'll be viewing his video materials also in the future, and we'll be in touch. And please keep watching and keep your humanity alive. Thank you very much.